Hey everyone, hope you guys are doing okay during this unprecedented time. I know I myself am surviving. I had a lot of time to reflect on a topic that I was introduced to this year, and that was the topic of sustainability. And I don't really have much experience in this subject, so I was met with Fatima, Chris, and Isaac, and those guys are friends of mine that have much more experience in this line of work, and I had the pleasure to speak with them and to learn through them what sustainability is all about. So come join me and let's learn more about what this topic is and how it can potentially impact our world in a more positive way. So let's just jump right into it. So what is sustainability? There are many definitions, but the way I define it for myself is just being creative, essentially. It's just making the most out of the resources that you have and just considering the future. Isaac shared with me a definition that resonated with him.
The Brundtland definition of sustainability, which goes something like, so it's the ability to meet your present needs or society's present needs without sacrificing future generations. I generally agree with this, and I think to personalize a little bit more, I would say something like it's the practice and pursuit of living within the limitations of the natural world while respecting and bettering humanity. I think sustainability is about honestly making life better for everybody. Your mental and physical health are really the foundation of setting any good habit, which I think sustainability ultimately is. Where we have to get new habits and new ways of thinking about the world and taking care of each other.
So why is sustainability so important? I don't need to remind anyone about climate change. I feel like we've all come across that subject at some point or another in our lives. Unfortunately, climate change has had a devastating effect on people that have experienced it firsthand. And those people that have experienced it firsthand are communities that are occupied by minorities.
I want to mention to bring to light and to make amends for the disproportionate effects climate change has on minority and marginalized communities. So these communities have suffered and continue to suffer from, worse air quality, worse water quality from emissions that they're not responsible for. And that's really just the tip of the iceberg with that conversation. But that's another reason why sustainability is so important for the future. It's not just about mitigating the environmental impacts, but also recognizing the social impacts that our actions will have in the future.
Chris majored in accounting, and it's his belief that smarter business practices are really going to remedy that issue. So this is his take on that.
For me, sustainability is about increasing operating margins, higher operating margins for businesses overall, creating a better world through intelligent business practices, but at the same time, revising financial policy and socioeconomic policies so that those realizations in earnings and profits actually make it to the communities who are marginalized and disenfranchised, who need the support and who need the assistance to be enabled to succeed.
So just in the past decade, there have been numerous natural disasters. There have been hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, wildfires. Some of you are probably even wondering if this new pandemic is a result of climate change. And my answer to that is that it's too early to say, since we're still learning new things about this disease with each passing day. So we'll get our answers soon enough. But my question is, with all these natural disasters, can we rely on the government to legislate sustainable practices? So I asked Chris that, and this was his take on it.
I'm about to get on a big soapbox right now. We understand from past experience that the current legislative climate in the country for the past few decades, not just the past few years, past few decades, has been very combative, to say the least. And to hope for any kind of legislation is kind of ludicrous at this point, and it has to come from the bottom. It has to come from people making sense with practical solutions that can be easily implemented Look at the leadership that came out of the COVID-19 crisis. There was no federal oversight. All of that leadership came from local municipalities and state municipalities. So leadership can come from the bottom. I think it has to come from the bottom, especially in this day and age.
So I agree with Chris. Though it's a necessary component of our country's infrastructure, our government has always been notorious for their indifference to climate-related issues. It's also reassuring to know that change starts with us. We have the power to influence the well-being of our country, our world, our future. Climate change is a pretty scary subject, but it doesn't have to be a daunting issue to solve. So I asked Fatima, what can we do to be a little bit more sustainable? What can we do to get the ball rolling?
I like to think the ball is already moving. It definitely needs to pick up speed, but I like to think it's getting there. So doing things like learning how to sort your waste, or better yet, reducing your waste, is sort of an easy entry point to begin to change your habits to be more sustainable. Energy efficiency is another good entry point, just flipping off the lights when you leave the room, unplugging things that are in use to avoid unnecessary energy consumption. Once you've established those sort of easy habits, you can start thinking of how you can expand out into larger impacts. So start thinking about, how can I reduce my emissions from my commute to work or to school? How is my house being supplied? Is it being supplied by renewable energy? You can actually check this. You check your local supplier. And these actions really aren't about giving up things necessarily. It's just about changing. I would just say, note what changes you can make to be more sustainable and see if it's doable for you. I'm not going to beat myself up over what I can't reasonably accomplish, but I should always be thinking of what I can do and try those out.
So let's say we all start to become a little bit more sustainable. So what kind of changes can our society expect in the future?
One measure of sustainability in ways is efficiency, right? How can we get the most output with the least input, but over multiple generations of a product or a service, right? How can we sustain that as efficiently as possible?
If we make things more efficient, we realize more gains, just period. On the other side of that same coin, some industries will be affected, obviously, like the fossil fuel industry and other industries that will become defunct as a result of this shift. It doesn't mean the end of the world for these businesses or corporations. It just means a need for innovation. And that's what's really going to benefit people. Whether it's due to COVID, or whether it's due to peak oil, or whatever comes next, this adjustment will allow us the ability to adapt and be flexible as a society overall.
So I'd like to close things off with this. If you feel an itching desire to create some positive change, pursue that change. Don't let that flame go out, because that's the only way we're going to be making it out of this crisis stronger than ever. And I encourage you, including myself, to integrate more sustainable practices in our lives. And it's the small things that matter, whether that be unplugging appliances that aren't being used, using a reusable water bottle, separating your waste to trash, compost, and recyclables, having shorter showers, and just turning off the lights if there's a room that's not being occupied. I mean, there's so many ways to be sustainable, and however you decide to integrate sustainable practices in your life, just remember that you are making a change and that your contribution is going to help the world, our communities, and future generations to come. So really consider that. And in light of this pandemic, I think it's time for us to really take a deep breath, pause, and reflect on the type of people that we want to be coming out of this. And let's just save the world, man. Let's just do this. Let's do this.